Hey there folks, so today I have the Game Boy Advance SP TV Out kit, and see if we can't take a look at that here. So same deal as usual. When you get one of these things, you get the converter board, some wire to wire it up, looks like you get a little bit of extra double-sided tape, the ribbon cable to connect the converter board to the SP, some insulation for the back of the screen, and then the screen itself. And because this is the TV out version, you also get one of these cables here. I did already go ahead and separate it and label it to keep it separate from my other cable, because I do have an older version of a similar kit that has the exact same connectors on the other end, but is wired up differently. So the newer version of the kit is intended to be used with pin 1 of the link port, and such this connector is wired up with pin 1 to the video cable, whereas the older version, this cable, this guy has pin 3 on that connector wired up to the video cable. I don't know if this is universal, but one way I can tell my cables apart is this is just one solid piece on the old cable, whereas on the new cable we have this little divider here. I don't know how prominent that is. Also, I did notice the headphone jack connector is gold plated on the new cable and silver on the old cable. I don't know if that's a universal thing, but it is just something I noticed with my cables, but I went ahead and labeled them anyway to keep them apart, because anyway. Alright, so let me stack this up so we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to be using a pretty familiar SP here for the build. I did put a stock screen in this thing just so we can compare it, get a little bit better idea of how much better the new screens are. This particular SP has had so many kits in it. Let's go ahead and get it torn down here. Now is as good a time as any to clean the console if you're going to be reusing the original shell, or reshell it for that matter. I'm going to be using the original shell, but realistically this thing's been reshelled recently, so I'm not going to be doing either of those things. Pop that off, make sure the square nut for the battery cover does not fall out. And before I continue, let's get a baseline for power usage. I do already have numbers for this console somewhere, but I'd rather just get some fresh numbers. Come on, there we go. Set my power supply to 3.7 volts. One of these days I will get that memorized. And we'll try it out. So this screen is particularly bad. Like, this is a bad screen in general. There's a lot of both water damage and sun damage. Nice, right? But it does still work, and it does still give us numbers in the range that we would expect. So at 3.7 volts, this SP is pulling anywhere from 59 to 57 to 61 milliamps, which is pretty much exactly what we'd expect. Just for funsies, if we turn the light off, we get 31 to 34 milliamps. Exact same game I always test with in the exact same place. Volume up, so on and so forth. Alright, and now continue with the tear down here. That up so I can pull this screen off. And let us test the new screen here. And this is the TV version. So we have that extra chip here for the TV out. You can see it's labeled TV version instead of the older ones that are, I think it says 2-in-1. Does that go that way or does that go the other way? Hang on. Thinking I'm having a dumb right now. Yeah. There we go. Oh, it looks better. Why can I go all morning with no messages? And then the second I start a video. Anyway. I already forgot. Okay. Try this out here. It's not the best place to put that. There we go. It's in the exact same spot. Well, that's not good. My power supply was hitting the current limit, which is kind of sketchy, but at the same time there is a lot of inrush for something like this, so it's not the end of the world, but alright. So there's that. The default brightness, whatever this is, wherever, I don't know. 3.7 volts. It's pulling 138 to about 147 milliamps. Alright, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 brightness levels. At the minimum level, it is 112 to 128 milliamps. Oh, shoot. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think. Yeah, darn. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Alright, and at max brightness, it's pulling, I see 180 to 178 to 187 milliamps. So, quite a bit more. Yeah, and that was max. And the color palettes don't seem to make any real difference for battery life. I didn't see anything that I wouldn't consider margin of error as I was flipping through those. But this kit should store your settings so every time you reboot it, it's the same palette if you want it, but brightness if you don't. This long one is the palette sensor. If you want to remove that, don't blame you. The short one is the brightness sensor. The only thing is, because they have a memory, set it to what you want, turn it off. Then remove the sensor. Otherwise, you're much more likely to accidentally trigger it, and you'll have a hard time getting it set back to how you want it. Easy peasy. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue with the install now that we know that works. Oh, I forgot to unplug it. That might help, huh? All right. That usually never works. All right. All right, so OEM shells, this is actually a lot more difficult than aftermarket, but you want to take a plastic spudger and kind of jam it in between the screw cover and the plastic. You want to deflect the screw cover, because otherwise you'll dent the plastic and you'll leave a mark. In my particular case, since this is aftermarket, these things come out real easy, but the process is the same for OEM and aftermarket. There's just no adhesive holding these in. Can use a little bit of double-sided tape. It'll probably work nicely, but in my particular case, I've had this thing apart so many times that I'm not going to bother with that. Alright, 5 screws, swing it back closed. The back should come off. Sometimes the screen sticks to the back, sometimes it doesn't. But once you got the back off, you can just lift it out, and that should be it. The ribbon cable should slip right out as long as you got that hinge cover off. And there you go, you're good to start installing the new screen. If you want to reshell your console, I highly recommend using your original hinges. Getting them out can be kind of a pain in the butt, but I did make and release a little tool that you can 3D print. You just take your closed shell, jam the tool in there, apply pressure, and the hinge will pop out. Once you release the clips, the tool won't actually remove the hinge, it just releases the clips. But once you've got that released, there we go. You can take like a spudger or something and push them out. That one doesn't look fully released. I believe it's supposed to come out that way, which is probably why it's not coming out. Alright, well, sometimes they fight you, but sometimes you need something a little bit harder than a spudger. But there you go, just like that. It's got to come out while it's open. Because if you look into the holes, you can see there's these notches on the sides. Those have to line up with the notches on the hinge. Otherwise the hinge won't go in. And assembly is the opposite of removal. Black usually goes on the left, white usually goes on the right if you're using OEM. If you're using aftermarket, it could be a little bit different. I do have another video on that, but that's for another time. Alright, and if you're reshelling your console, it's probably worth noting that there are Ips Ready Shells that you can get. You can see, if you look at a normal SP shell, you have this like inner wall on all the sides, but the Ips Ready shells don't have that on one of the sides to make room for the screen here. So if we take our kit and jam that in there, and I am going to fold this under. Usually fold it over, but change it up a little this time. I think I looped that around the wrong way. Doesn't matter, I'll fix it in a second. You can drop that right on without having to trim it. Whereas if we take an OEM cover, I do have one handy, that's convenient. Notice on the right side here, left side, depends on how you're holding it, there's a little bit more plastic that will need to come off. I have trimmed this off in other videos, and with the shell I'm going to be using, I have already trimmed it off here, and that should fit all the same. But let's get this situated so I can do it proper. I'm going to wait on that because we're going to try something a little bit different this time. I'm going to get that folded so I can close this up, and we're going to do a test fit. Make sure everything is trimmed proper, and then it goes together. And indeed it does, because I have already trimmed this shell. But again, I cut this plastic wall here on the right side, I cut that flush with the outer wall, as opposed to... Why are you not focusing today? Come on. Is it lighting? There we go. Nope. You can see this wall is untrimmed, whereas on this side I have it trimmed down flush, and then I even went and cut that deeper on the inside as well. And because that fits, we're going to do this in a little bit of a different order. I'm going to pop this out, and this was, oh yeah. For the sake of install, I am going to go ahead and do the TV out wiring right now, but I will probably not finish it right now. But if you don't want to do any soldering, you don't have to. Just probably not the best idea to get the TV out version if you don't want to do any soldering. But go ahead and get this prepared here. All right. And the ground cable, I am going to put a little kink in the end. So I don't get these two mixed up. All right. Now, this was suggested to me in comments of another video, and it actually makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm sorry, I don't remember who specifically suggested it to me or even which video, or I'd go look it up. But if you want to solder in the brightness control wire so that you can use this button to control the brightness, just go ahead and with the SP out of the shell, go ahead and pop the ribbon in. Let's go ahead and get that tinned. There we go. Get the wire on there. And I'm going to route this down and around over here. And this is very long, so I'm going to clean it up. In that, and then we are really, there we go. We're soldering to Q12B. You don't even have to look that up because this SP has already had an IPS kit before. It's already tinned. And while we're here, actually, you know what? I guess I will go ahead and do the IPS kit wiring for the TV out because it's on the top and it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt to get to once this is inserted. So, let's go back to this. This particular cable that I have labeled pin 1, I want to reiterate this. There are two different wiring schemes for these cables. I went over this in the beginning. My older kit uses pin 3. This one uses pin 1. Follow the instructions for wherever you get the kit. You get it from Retro Game Repair Shop, which is what I did here. They're probably going to be using pin 3. follow the instructions on the listing. You get this thing from like AliExpress or some other seller, it's probably using pin 1, follow the instructions for that listing. Pin 1 refers to which pin on this connector that we're connecting it up to. For the pin 1 installation, that is this pin right here. You notice that big thick trace right under it? That trace needs to be cut. If you're using the pin 3 version, that's the pin right next to pin 1, and you just solder it right to that. You don't need to cut any traces or anything. But how we will do that, we're going to run these cables through. And it's going to make connecting things kind of weird, but we'll get there. We'll get there in the end. And again, this particular kit is from Retro Game Repair Shop, which means I'm using pin 3 and not pin 1. So go ahead and get that tinned, and then we will solder the AV cable to that pin. Ta-da! Next, we will do the ground pin, which we can do pin 6 if we want, but it's easier to just do that big pin right there. I'm gonna dekink this. Let's solder that in. There we go. And that is all of the wiring necessary. Now we can flip this around. And we're just going to run this cable through. It'll fit through that cutout. And that makes our life so much easier. I'm going to pull that screen out for the moment. Get all this stuff reinserted. So we're working a little bit backwards here. But in the end, it should make things a little bit easier. Alright, we'll just route those wires, make sure that they're not in the way of anything. Oh, shoot. Okay, well that's fine. I can't install the motherboard properly just yet because I don't have the hinge cover on. But I can at least put one screw in to hold things in place while I manipulate this. Alright. Get to peel that off. Oh, there we go. And we don't want to press down on the LCD to connect this. It's a good way to break the LCD. Get this little twist. Actually, for the sake of wire routing, let's run the wires through the middle of the cable. That'll make things nice and smooth. I want to run that underneath. And then that should be it. We probably want to be careful with these wires because they are carrying a video signal, so video signal that is particularly sensitive to interference, so we probably don't want to run them all around the board, but there's only so much we can do with that. I'm going to drop the touch sensor right in the middle there, or close enough at least. And then I'm going to take, I'm going to take some of this double-sided tape. I'm not going to use it as double-sided tape. But I'm going to hold that board in place. And that should be it. So let's get the top reassembled. And get the hinge cover on, which goes like that. I'm going to hold that in place while I flip this up. I suppose that is one downside to running all the wires separately or first. But it's probably easier getting in there with the screwdriver than it is with the soldering iron. Done. Forget about the LED light pipe. Usually falls out of cases. I've had the motherboard in this thing for most of the time though, so I think I'm good. Yeah. It's usually about at this point where I realize that I messed up. There it is. There's what I messed up. I forgot to put the insulation on the LCD. Now, in my experience, this is not strictly necessary, but I still highly recommend putting it on there. There's not much I can do now at this point other than take it apart and try again, but guess let's go ahead and do that. But in my experience, it's not strictly necessary. It is definitely a good idea. I don't know how these things are going to wear down the road, but as is, there's nothing on the back that they can short on. Come on. So there we go, now it's sticking to the screen. Oh dear, that, no, okay. Thought I messed up for a second. Well, that's not going anywhere. Now we're good, except that my tape isn't really holding it down anymore. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I wonder if it might be better to actually twist these. You know, twisted pair and all that. Alright. Might make it a little bit less sensitive to interference. Especially since it's a composite signal. You're going to want as much quality as you can possibly get out of that. All right. And there we go. Looks good. I'm not expecting too many differences with this new kit. Brightness control works fine. Because I have done a video on this particular kit before, and I really didn't notice any problems. And to my knowledge, there's nothing new. They haven't changed anything. That is not my flash card. Okay, I found a flash card. But no reason we can't run some tests anyway. This is using one of the older 9380 based LCDs rather than the newer like drop-in kit that they've been. This isn't that drop-in one. This is actually one of the Cloud Game Store ones, but it's pretty similar. You get what I'm trying to get at. Let's see. Grid, yeah, everything's fine, nothing's cut off, didn't expect it to be. Linearity, we got a perfect circle, as we'd expect. Same as it's been. Color bars. Now this, I think, should make an interesting comparison. I don't know that I have directly compared one of the 9380 kits to like an AGS 101, but I have one right here. I just need to grab a flash card for that. Alright, got another one. You'd think I have enough of these freaking things laying around that I wouldn't have to search for them. I wouldn't have to dig through everything. Alright, so this here on the right is a stock... What did I hit? Gradient color bars. There we go. This is a stock AGS 101 console. Original screen. The console itself is refurbed, but it's an original 2005 screen. No mods to it other than the case itself. And these are at pretty similar brightnesses. Kill that light there. You can get an idea. In person, I can see... So how this test is, we have clearly defined blocks of color, and I don't know what the ideal is, and you'll have to forgive me, there's only so much I can do about the glare from my window there. I don't know what the ideal is, but... Ooh, touchscreen. Touch sensor, rather. But I can see each individual block of color for the whites, for the blue, for the green, and for the red on this screen. On the AGS 101, down near the dark areas, like between 0 and 4 in person, I can see all of them. Between 4 and E, however, the blue looks like a smooth gradient. White, I can see each block. Green, I can see each block through about C. And then red, I can see each block through about 8-ish. So it does start blending a little bit. I don't know what the ideal is. I'd hazard to say this is technically better, but this might look better depending on the specific game. What this sort of effect allows for is it allows you to blend two colors together and make it look like more colors, make it look like a smoother transition. It'll cut down on some dithering in some areas, but it's not necessarily a more accurate color representation. Here's the classic color bar test. One interesting thing that I see that I don't know if the camera's going to pick up, on these two blocks in particular, between the green and the pink, I can see this real ugly line, and between the red and the blue I see this real ugly line between them. I suspect that has something to do with the sub-pixel arrangement, because don't forget, each pixel in this screen, 240 by 160 or whatever it is, each pixel is made up of 3 individual sub-pixels, a red, a green, and a blue. And so with the particular arrangement of the subpixels, I suspect it's causing a hard line between these two colors and those two colors. Whites look much whiter on the new screen. Blacks look pretty darn black. These 3 squares in the bottom, if I look real close, I can see that they're 3 different squares, but they look all blended together. Whereas on the AGS 101, again, I have to look real close, but if I'm looking at this one, I can see that this middle square is actually 3 different squares, so I can see the blacks a little bit better on this one. If I bump up the brightness, however, that difference disappears. This square is much darker on this screen, whereas this one looks like... This looks... Actually, no. Now that I've cranked the brightness up, they both look like a navy blue, but this one looks much lighter. I don't know how it's supposed to look, but there's a comparison. I hope it helps. Nothing's going to be perfect ever with these things. There's always going to be compromises, but overall, I think the compromises work out much better for the 9380 screen, and we've already tested that. All right. So I've also showed those tests with the Cloud Game Store screen and the quote-unquote drop-in screen. And my conclusion, you can watch those videos for more detail, but overall, I think the Cloud Game Store screen looked fantastic, but the drop-in screen looked a little bit better. And then, again, side by side, this screen next to the drop-in screen, this one tended to look a little bit better. And, oh, for those keeping track at home, this was a newly manufactured LG screen, not a Topley screen, and not a new old stock Topley screen. I meant to cover that, but things happen. Anyway, let us reset that. Pull out just a little bit. And we're going to boot into Pokemon Emerald here. I'm using my flashcard version instead of my actual version because I'm in a slightly different spot in both of them. But if we load into this, I'm on the other side of the Elite Four here. Pull back in. I don't know why I zoomed out so premature. Okay, I like looking at this because I just like the colors in this area, the background. I like how it looks on the IPS. The colors are just pleasing. The contrast is nice. The saturation is nice. Everything is just nice. I like how it looks. I should get this one too. So we can take a look at both of them side by side. No. We want Emerald JP. You know, give a practical example instead of just, you know, saying, hey, this looks good, but don't look at anything else. But there you go. Yeah, it is more saturated. That's just how this is designed. I think it looks better. I think side by side, this thing looks really washed out. And looking at my camera, it's not looking so good. I'm going to try messing around with the focus. But I don't think I'm going to get anywhere. All I'm doing is causing a shake. Yeah. I think this looks better. You're well within your rights to prefer this. That's fine, but they do look different. This isn't the original either. Just because this is an original Game Boy doesn't mean this is the screen that this game was designed to run on. So, like it or hate it, I still think that looks better. Anyway, let's move on, because I'm going to start ranting about something that is not quite relevant to this particular kit. I believe if we press and hold the brightness button, there we go, it'll switch to the screen out, and then you plug in the cable and you can test it out on screen. So let me go ahead and get that set up. I'm going to flip that off for the moment. And here is my testing setup. It's going to be, or my capture setup rather, it's going to be a little bit different than the last time I showed off one of these and captured. What I'm using is I'm using one of these uber cheap HDMI USB 3.0 capture cards. Hey, it works, okay? It's fine. Much higher quality than the other capture card that I have. This is what I used last time, this video DVR thing with composite and S-video hanging off. These things are absolute garbage. But because this thing doesn't output HDMI, on the other end of this, I have one of these cheapo AV2 HDMI upscaling boxes with composite inputs on it. I'm going to be using this to capture. Usually you'd need a mini HDMI powering this thing, because this is not a passive converter, but depending on your HDMI device, your device might be able to provide 5 volt over the HDMI cable, and my capture card does, because I've modified my capture card to provide 5 volt over the cable. And so this can take that 5 volt, and then we don't need external power. I have it set to 1080p, and I'm going to be capturing through OBS, and give me just a moment while I get this all plugged in. Alright, so I've got that all plugged in. Let's go ahead and get this booted up. I'm actually going to test it out on Super Mario World. And we'll turn the volume up because these cables come with the headphone adapter. SP doesn't have headphone adapter. You have to purchase separately one of those little SP headphone dongles to plug in, and I do have some somewhere, but I don't know where. So we're just going to use the speaker audio. It shouldn't make any difference. If your SP sounds good over headphones, then it'll sound good. Here, the kit's doing absolutely nothing for that. Let me go ahead and get that plugged in. And you'll have to forgive me because my capture card does not have pass-through. So once I get it switched over, I'm playing through the capture card. And yep, picks it up nicely. Alright. So yeah, there are definitely some issues, but I think those issues are a result of one of the many things in my capture chain, but ultimately it's because of composite. If this thing output component or RGB or S-video or anything, we'd be using that, but we have composite. So let's try it out. Now, first thing I'm noticing is the input lag is going to make this really difficult. I don't know in particular what is the fault. I think it's one of my capture cards. Every device in this chain is adding lag. So we have the screen converter up in here, up in the top. That's adding a little bit of lag. Then we have the TV encoder chip in here, adding a little bit of lag. Then I have the component to HDMI converter, adding a little bit of lag. Then I have my capture card, adding a little bit of lag. And then I have OBS displaying the capture window, adding a little bit of lag. So, as you can tell, I've got quite a few things working against me here. The fact that I'm not doing terrible is more a result of my familiarity with this game. But it's not great. I'm gonna try and sync up the video footage that I'm recording. And if you notice there's some lag, it's because the lag's real, folks. Oh, aha. Okay. Also, I suppose it's worth noting, the capture card, not the capture card, the IPS kit, the TV out version kit, it's outputting a full signal, full screen signal. That means if your TV is widescreen, which technically my TV is this HDMI component converter. If your TV is widescreen, that's going to result in a widescreen image. If your TV is standard aspect ratio, 4:3, that's going to result in a 4:3 image. If somehow you have a 3:2 TV, a TV with a 3:2 aspect ratio, then it'll be perfect. But that's not, I don't think that's a thing. I don't think anyone makes those. You can get like computers and tablets and stuff, but then you're still running it through a capture card, and if you're running it through a capture card, then you can always manipulate the footage anyway, so. I don't really know how, like, an OSSC or something will work. I think you can manipulate it that way. One thing, let's look at this. Let's look at Luigi's hat and Yoshi and the color of the grass. Like, that's all blurring together. That's the component for you. Let me switch it back to the internal screen. Compare that. They're different colors on the original screen. I can tell that very easily. They don't blur together at all. But there you go. And just for fun, let me switch over to the other capture card and let's try that out. Let's just rule out some of the lag by removing some of the steps in this chain. Alright, so I've got the other capture card plugged in. You can see I'm having basically the same problem with colors. It is surprisingly somewhat a little bit better. I'm going to run through the same level again though. I just want to test the input lag, which is much better. Still not great, but I'm gonna have a hard time syncing these. Oop. Ah. Oh well, doesn't matter. Just keep going. Ooh. Alright. Yeah, so my capture card chain was definitely adding a little bit too much input lag. I can play with input lag. I can only play with so much input lag, especially a game like Super Mario World. And if we swap, of course it defaults back to the internal screen. We can switch that over. Just gotta hold that. And you'll forgive me, I was just switching those over real quick to help sync my footage. What do we want to take a look at? Let's look at Pokemon again. Just want to show that same scene. Is it playable? 100%. Is it good? That's a different story entirely. You'll have to forgive me for not getting too in-depth into the video quality of the output. I simply don't have the equipment to test this appropriately. You saw I have the two capture cards. They both kind of suck. But it is what it is, right? If I had a better capture card, I could do a little bit better testing, but I think a lot of my issues with input lag especially are a result of just my particular setup. If you were to plug this straight into a CRT, I'm sure the experience would be phenomenal. I don't have a CRT. I'm not getting a CRT. And my TV does not have a composite input. I would have to use the AV HDMI box, but I'm not going to be doing that. I don't I'm not going to plug this into my TV and film it. It's not going to... I don't think it's going to add anything valuable to this as is. If you want to, like, if you're seriously looking into TV output, there are other options, and I went over a lot of this in my video on the Game Boy Advance version of this kit. And, you know, comes down to, you could do like a Game Boy player on a GameCube. If you modify the output on the GameCube, then it'll look better. But cheaper and higher quality options for output, something like Woozle's Consolizer or even ZW Energy's GBA HD. I'll go ahead and throw links to both of those down in the description there. I don't have videos on either of them yet, but cool stuff. I'd recommend checking them out. If you want the best video quality for TV, for playing on TV. But of course, none of those things are like fitting within a stock Game Boy. Ooh, I accidentally pulled the card out a little. All of those things are like big boxes that you attach a Game Boy to, whereas this is, you know, it's a fully self-contained Game Boy. So there are different options for different things. This, I would consider this an option for someone who mostly wants to play on the go, but who might occasionally want to plug it into their TV. And don't forget, you're still going to be playing with the Game Boy as a controller. So, like it or hate it, you know, if you don't like playing with an SP, then getting a TV out kit for your SP is probably not the best idea. But you know who you are. Otherwise, I think at this point I'm just going to ramble, so I think I need to wrap this up. Oh, no, one more thing. Oop, hitting my camera. We discussed this earlier, but the pin 1 versus pin 3 wiring for the TV. Again, mine was using the pin 3 because I got this from Retro Game Repair Shop. That other cable I had is pin 1 wired. It didn't necessarily come with this kit. It's just what I had on my desk. But most of them are going to be coming with pin 1 wiring, which means you need to scratch that trace and wire up to pin 1, or you need to repin your cable. Neither of those options is very pleasant, but it is what it is. Another option, it is just composite, so you can wire it up to whatever connector you want. You don't have to use the included cable. You could use a, like you could just slap a RCA jack on the darn thing. So you can plug your, so you can plug like an aux cable in. If you have a cable with RCA on both sides, you can just slap a jack on there somewhere and use that instead. I've seen a few mods where people will use the headphone jack. I guess that applies more towards the Game Boy Advance rather than the SP, but if you have a headphone jack mod in your SP, you could try that. But I don't know. It's however the heck you want to have it set up. I'm putting things away when I should be doing my video. I also discussed this, not necessarily in the video itself. Ooh, wow, with TV out enabled, that thing gets kind of warm. When you're using the pin 3 wiring method, your link port might not necessarily work. Not the way you think it does, anyway. I can plug in a multi-boot adapter. It's freezing. It should boot, but it's not going to work properly. There it goes. Yeah, it'll boot, but then it'll give me a wireless error, or it usually does. Interesting. I didn't expect that to not give the error. Well, I guess that leads me to the next thing. Let me grab another one of those and let's double check that let's double check that it's not working. I don't think it should be working, so let me grab another one. Alright, here we go. I got another GBA with another wireless adapter. We're gonna boot them both into Pokemans. And it should not matter that they are both running the exact same game. I think it's this one. Old, worn, crusty jacks. I know this thing works. Oh, good Lord. This isn't even the modified console. Alright. Alright, well, we'll have to troubleshoot that later. Another SP here. And if this confirms my test results from last time, I'm not going to bother retesting all that stuff that I tested, all the link port, link cable stuff. Yeah, there it goes. What I expect to see is an empty room on this console and a room with one other person on this console. Oh, how very interesting. Well, there you go. It looks like they finally fixed that issue. Oh yeah, you're not supposed to talk at the same time. There you go. I just mixed records with myself. So they fixed that issue. There you go. So if you're using... I mean, you can't use TV out at the same time. That's just to be expected. But if you're using something, you know, an accessory that requires power, you've still got it. If you're using any wireless communication, still seems to work. If you're using just a regular link cable, that should also work. I just turned these both off. I don't really want to go through all that again. But if the wireless adapter is working, then I see no reason why this shouldn't work. I have been told it works, and I just confirmed at least one of those things, so we should be good. We're finally at that point, because the previous versions of these kits all had some glaring flaw if you wanted link port compatibility to remain. But in this particular case, I see no reason not to do that. It just works. Thanks, Todd. But there you go. I think that's all I've got. Super cool kit. Thanks to Retro Game Repair Shop for sending this my way to check out. Go ahead and check out the description for links to this screen kit if you want to grab one for yourself. Now, knowing what I know, I might recommend staying away from the kits that say to use pin 1 and instead stick with the kits that say to use pin 3, because those should be the updated version. I don't know. I don't know if the old pin 1 kits will work just fine pin 3. But, you know, still going to depend on which cable you get. So, perhaps for the best to stick with Retro Game Repair Shop's offerings for now, because those are the only ones that I can confirm are working this way. Hopefully the rest of the kits will follow suit soon, but sometimes it's hard to tell if your seller has old stock and they're not telling you that they have old stock. But either way, that's all I got. Thanks, guys.